Well, my guest today is Andy Hockley, the star of many pantomimes at the Belgrade Theatre, West End musicals, and Mr. Jolly in Playdays. So please welcome Andy Hockley. So my first question is, how did you get into the theatre business?
No, I didn't go the normal route, Ben. I didn't train at drama school or anything. I My degree is in theatre design, so I went to art college, and by the time I graduated, I'd done a lot of sort of semi-professional work at an arts centre, which was on my university campus, and I kind of got. It doesn't happen now. You read about it in books, but I kind of got headhunted. I was spotted in a play and offered an equity card, which you needed in those days, by a director that was happened to be in the audience. And yeah, I had a weekend to make a decision of whether I was going to stay in my job, where I was then working at the arts centre as assistant technical manager, or whether I was going to take the plunge and give acting a crack. And it's something that deep down I'd always wanted to do, but never really had the belief in myself or the commitment to follow it through. So it was my mum and dad really that swayed me. I thought when I told them what I was thinking of doing, they'd go mad and say, "Why on earth would you give up a job working for the university to become an actor? Because it's such a precarious occupation." Anyway, I they gave me their blessing to do it. They said, "Have a go. If it doesn't work out for you, you can always fall back on what you've trained in." Luckily, it did work out for me, and I continued in the business for 40 years.
Mhm.
And the irony is
Mhm.
that the art centre where I worked
Mhm.
was a heap of rubble within 12 months because the university decided they didn't want it on their campus anymore. So they flattened it and built a science park. So I'd have been made redundant anyway
Mhm.
within 12 months. So it was just as well that I made that choice.
Do you see a lot of theatre when you were younger?
Did I see a lot of theatre?
Yes.
Yes, I did. I did. I used to go to the new theatre in Cardiff every year to see the Panto there, which is how I my first introduction to pantomime. Um, but I was lucky that my mum and dad did take me to see stuff. We used to go over to Bristol, Porthcawl Pavilion. I saw a lot of theatre, not what you would consider like highbrow theatre. Then obviously it was kids' theatre when I was little,
Mm.
but then when I went to Cardiff to do my foundation course at art college, and then when I went to Birmingham to do my degree course,
Mm.
I was lucky in Birmingham that I had the Midlands Arts Centre, Birmingham Rep, old and new, the Hippodrome, the Alex. There was a whole wealth of theatre that I saw, and I used to, just to supplement my grant, I used to work on a casual basis on the stage crew at Birmingham Rep just to earn some extra pennies. And then I used to obviously saw a lot of shows for free then. So yeah, I did see a lot. And Stratford, of course, I used to go down to Stratford quite a bit and to the RSC.
How did your first pantomime came about at the Belgrade Theatre in 1989 within Lochland?
You've done your research, haven't you? You know all about where I was. I did. Well, I'll take you back to 1982.
Mm.
Um, I was in my third year at college, and part of my degree course was to help. Help. I was co-designer.
Mm.
It's a better title than helping out. I was co-designer of a production of Barefoot in the Park at the Belgrade Theatre in Coventry that my head of department at college designed. So I was his assistant. And playing the lead male in that play was Ian Lachlan.
Mhm.
So that's when we first met. So Ian and I go back to 1982. But then in 1989, I think it must have been, I'd become an actor in the interim. So
Mm.
I'd done my degree. I'd worked as assistant technical manager for a year.
Mm.
And then I got my equity card in, must have been 1984. So by the time we got to 1989, I'd had 5 years experience as an actor under my belt and was asked to do a road show based on a children's radio series called Cat's Whiskers, which Ian was already involved in. Unbeknownst to me, and he certainly didn't know I was going to be in it, and didn't know me as an actor then anyway. He remembered me eventually as this design student that he'd worked with like 7 years previously. So we did this radio roadshow together and went around the country doing live kids shows. A little bit like you're aware of Fun Song Factory, aren't you?
Yeah.
So this Cat's Whiskers Roadshow was sort of built around the same sort of premise as Fun Song Factory was. So it was lots of audience participation, lots of songs, dances, a bit of comedy, which Ian and I did together. And we were having a drink in a pub in Cardiff one day, and he said, have you ever done a panto before? And I said, no, but I'd love to, because obviously I saw a lot when I was here in Cardiff. And he said, well, I'm doing one in Coventry in 1989. Would you be interested in being in it? And sometimes the world conspires to bring things together that are absolutely right, because I had just moved from Birmingham to Coventry. And I'd been in digs there for about 3 months. And I thought, well, this is pretty perfect. You know, I've just moved to Coventry and now I'm getting the chance to actually do a job there. It wasn't my first time working at the Belgrade. I'd done a play there in 1986. But yeah, so Ian and I's working relationship on the pantomime started in 1989, and we're still there.
What is it like doing the pantomime in the 80s and 90s, and how is it different from today?
That's a really good question, Ben. I think the main difference is because a lot of pantos now, a lot of commercial pantos have gone with the times, and they've started to use more modern technology, you know, like video walls and all this sort of stuff, and AI stuff. The sort of pantos we do at the Belgrade, they're very, very traditional. And so nothing's really changed. You know, it's still cloths that fly in and out. It's still cut out two-dimensional scenery that comes on trucks. So technically, it's not really changed that much. I've noticed the biggest difference is in the audiences, because you used to notice with the children that you got up on stage to do the song sheet. I just think they kind of had more personality, and they were more fun, and they were easier to talk to in the 80s and 90s, because they didn't have the distraction of tablets and smartphones and computers and things like that. Whereas now, it's almost as if they've forgotten the art of conversation. Do you know what I mean? It's because they're so focused on their little gizmos and devices. And adult audiences have changed as well, just because life's changed. You know, the pace of life has changed. Things are probably a little more difficult now for a lot of people than they were in the 80s and 90s. So yeah, in answer to my long answer to your very good question is the biggest differences that I've noticed are in the audiences that come and see the shows.
When you do your panto characters, do you suggest a song to sing, or do you have a chat with Ian to fit your vocal range?
He normally picks the songs. Obviously, this year will be my 20th panto with him, so he kind of knows what I can do now. So when Ian puts the show together, he chooses the songs. That's one thing that has changed in the Belgrade Panto is the music content, because in the early days, all the music that we did was specifically written for the pantomime. Over probably the last 10 years or so, Ian started introducing cover versions simply because it's a kind of icebreaker with the audience. And that's one thing that we have gone along with, the way things have developed, is that doing cover songs that children especially are familiar with and hear, it kind of welcomes them in a bit more, if you know what I mean, rather than them sitting there listening to something that's been specifically written for the show that they will never have heard before and so are totally unfamiliar with. He's not gone all for covers. He still uses
Yeah.
specifically written music, but we do a little bit of a mix now. So I don't really suggest a song. I leave it to Ian, and then when we get the scripts through and we have the read-throughs and things, then we might chop and change it a bit because he might have some others in the back of his mind as alternatives.
Yeah. It makes it feel like an in-house musical when it's like that back in the day.
Yes, yeah, it definitely was. It felt more, yeah, it felt more particular to the Belgrade. But that feeling still is there. You know,
Yeah.
you talk to people who, and I think what backs up what I'm about to say is geographically, because of where Coventry is, because it's right in the middle of the country.
Yeah.
It's a great focal point for families who, you know, have got family members that live further north or further south. It's a great focal point right in the middle of the country. And I think what I've noticed with the Belgrade audience is that the Panto has become a huge tradition of the family's Christmases.
Yeah.
And it's when the families get together and it's their big treat, you know, it's their big trip out together to go and see the Belgrade Panto. And I think that's what's perpetuated its popularity, really.
In 1991 and 93, you were in two major films, Robin Hood's Prince of Thieves and Much Ado About Nothing. How did those come about?
Right. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves came about because I was doing a play in the West End in London, a play by an Italian playwright called Pirandello. It was called Enrico Quattro, or in English, Henry IV. And I was playing a kind of medieval, I suppose you could call him. I'm not going to go into the story because it's very convoluted and complex. On the surface of things, they're medieval soldiers. Yeah. They're not really. It's set in the 1920s, but it's to do with Enrico Quattro's mental state. So I was playing one of these guards, and there were two casting directors. Oh, and Enrico Quattro was played by Richard Harris, who you may know as the original Dumbledore in the Harry Potter movies, amongst a myriad of other things that he's done. Very, very famous, very well-established film and stage actor. And it was Richard's first appearance on stage for about 25 years, so it created a lot of interest. Yeah. And so a lot of people from the industry came to see it when it was on in the West End. And one night there were two casting directors called Noel Davis and Jeremy Zimmerman, who were big movie casting directors. And I thought my agent was having me on when one day they phoned up and said, "Oh, Davis and Zimmerman were in watching the show last night. They'd like you to come and screen test for a film that they're doing." And of course I thought, wow, that's amazing. So I went, screen tested for it, and got it. Played one of the merry men in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. So I was on that for about 10 weeks or something like that, maybe long. No, it was even longer because it went on and on and on to the extent that for the wedding scene at the end, when Robin and Maid Marian get married, there were hundreds, there were extras, and there were hundreds and hundreds of people in this scene, plus all the principals. And we all had these costumes designed in shades of green and, you know, ochres and things to fit in with the forest. But they were so delayed in filming it that by the time we filmed it, it was autumn. All the leaves had gone off the trees. So they redid all the costumes. It must have been massive expense into reds and browns and yellows and things so that we fitted in with the autumn. So that's how that is, literally being in the right show at the right time and being seen by the right people. And then it was the same thing with Much Ado About Nothing, really. I was doing a production of Coriolanus down at Chichester Festival Theatre with Renaissance Theatre Company, which was Kenneth Branagh's company. Yeah. And again, at the end of the run of Coriolanus, I got a message at stage door saying, would you go and see Mr. Branagh in his dressing room? And I thought, oh God, what have I done now? Anyway, he said, I'm filming this movie out in Tuscany in the summer. Do you fancy it? And I said, yeah, yes, I do. Thank you very much. So yeah, they came directly from doing other jobs, which most of your work does, to be honest.
Do you still keep in contact with any of the cast and crew from those films?
Not so much Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, because it was such a disparate group of people, and it was such a long time ago. But certainly the chaps that I shared the villa with, where we when we stayed in Tuscany, we had a little villa up in the mountains above the village where we filmed. And I still keep in touch with them.
Mm.
And yeah, and there's a couple of other actors who were sort of stalwarts of Ken Branagh's movies and theatre that I worked with in Coriolanus as well. And I still keep in touch with them. But crew, not so much, because there's so many of them.
Mm.
It's almost impossible to keep in touch with them all.
Did he ever perform much to do about nothing on stage?
I have done, actually, yeah. I say on stage, I did a big open air production of it at Fort Canning Park in Singapore. Trying to think what year it might have been. I think it must have been around about 2009, 2010. I'd already done a production of Midsummer Night's Dream in the same venue a couple of years previous, and built up quite a good working relationship with Singapore Repertory Theatre. And they, between 2007 and 2013, I went out once a year and did a project in Singapore. So the last project I did in Singapore was in 2013. But yeah, I played Dogberry in the open air production, which is the part that Michael Keaton played in the movie.
How did the role of Mr. Jolly came about in Playdays?
Well, I've watched the interview that you did with Ian,
Yes.
and I think he touched on this with you. There was and ironically, we're doing Sleeping Beauty
Yeah.
at Christmas,
Yeah.
but the last production of Sleeping Beauty that I did with Ian was in around about 1998. I played the king,
Yes.
and in that same production
Mm.
was a little known children's TV presenter called Justin Fletcher,
Yeah.
who's gone on to do great things. It was one of his first jobs. He played the jester,
Yeah.
and also in that same company was Colleen Daly and Bob Golding,
Yes.
who went on to do the voices of the Tweenies with Justin.
Yeah.
So they did that.
Mm.
Prior to that, so I'm thinking when I did Mr. Jolly, it must have been around 96, 97, because I did 2 series
Yeah.
of Playdays. Again, it was through being at the Belgrade with Ian and his then writing partner, Will Brenton,
Yeah.
who had just been tasked by the BBC to go in as new producers on Playdays and to do 2 things primarily. One was to revamp and simplify the roundabout stop, because the roundabout stop had become quite complex, and there were a lot of characters in it, and there were a lot of puppets in it, and the roundabout. And I think they just wanted to slimline it a little bit.
Yeah.
So I went down, did a screen test audition with the 3 puppets.
Mm.
Of course, as an actor, it's a nightmare, because you're almost conditioned to look at the person that's talking to you. And the one thing they kept saying to me when I was doing the screen test is, look at the puppets, and you have to channel the people through the puppets and use them. So I did the screen test, did the first series. Then then we left. There wasn't going to be any more Playdays, because that preschool slot had been pitched for and won by Anne Wood Productions.
Yeah.
And she did the Teletubbies.
Yeah.
But they didn't have, for the time that they needed to take over from, like, we had a certain amount of Playdays stops that we could carry on transmitting until the transfer point where Teletubbies took over. And they didn't have enough filmed. So the BBC came back to Felgates, the company that worked with the BBC to do Playdays, and said, look, we're in a bit of a pickle here. Do you think you could possibly do another 28 episodes? So we did, but what it meant was I was already touring with a show in '96. It must have been called Playdays. I think it was called Playdays '96, a puzzle for Mr. Jolly, and it was a stage show that toured.
Mm.
So I had to leave the tour to go back into the studio to do the other 26 episodes, 28 episodes, however many there were. And the person that took over from me in the stage show was Justin Fletcher. So it was kind of, it was one of Justin's first ever jobs. And as a result of him doing that, he then came to the Belgrade 2 years later to do the Panto. So you can see the way the business works, Ben.
Yeah.
It's circles within circles. You know, it's who you know and being in the right time at the right place, and working hard and hopefully being a nice person. You know, you just that's how the work continues.
Was it like playing Mr. Jolly? Was it any funny moments happened while filming the show? Or did you like the roundabout go
Oh, lots
down?
bits of set falling down and revealing the puppeteer behind. You know, the puppeteers getting cramp and being stuck because you can imagine when they those rides on the roundabout aren't very big. And for all the scenes that we have to do with the puppets going round on the roundabout, the puppeteers are crammed inside those little rides. So every now and again through a take, you do, ow, 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 because somebody's got cramp in their leg. So they have to be let out. Yeah, the sets used to, because the sets, as good as they were, you know, they were very much of a time and they were recycled a lot, so they were lashed together, and because they only had to last for you know a short amount of time, because the turnover of filming those scenes was very very fast. Like I used to do something like 8 episodes in a week or something, so I'd have a week's rehearsal and then we'd go into the studio, and because the studio was so small, if the roundabout was in there was no room for anything else apart from the 3 cameras that were filming it. So we'd film all the shots, all the intro shots with me singing "Roll Up and Ride On, Rosie."
Yeah.
All the 3 puppet characters choosing their tickets from the ticket booth.
Yeah.
All the introductory song. All those scenes for all 8 episodes were filmed one after the other, and then they clear the roundabout out of the studio and start putting the sets in. So then we'd film all the inserts and all the songs.
Was it like touring the Puzzle for Mr. Jolly show?
It was lovely because you got to meet your audience. You know, when you're doing it, your audience is the cameras, and you try and project your character and the comedy and the songs and things through the lens of the camera. But when you're on stage doing the same stuff, you know, and the recognition of all the kids and their parents used to join in with "Roll Up and Ride On, Rosie" because they were so familiar with it. And it just made me think, you know, oh, this is what goes on in people's living rooms when they're watching it, that they're actually singing along with it. But obviously you don't know that when you're filming it. So, but it was nice. Yeah, it was lovely to meet the kids. And the stage show was quite different because like, Peggy Patch was a full-size actress,
Yeah.
a proper actress. In fact, all of them were. You know, they were skin characters, masked characters, as opposed to puppets, and different actresses than I was doing it with on the TV.
Yeah.
So it kept you on your toes because everything was slightly different. Yeah, but they were good times. I'm glad I did it.
Was it an audio cassette of the stage show? Because they did an audio cassette of the previous show.
Not that they could well be, Ben. It's not that nothing I'm aware of and nothing that I've seen. The only extra thing that I got from Playdays was, apart from, well, a lot of it is on YouTube now, actually,
Yeah.
but I've got the old VHS copies knocking around here somewhere. They produced one of these magazine specials,
Yeah.
and we went off into the countryside, a little cottage in Gloucestershire, and I can't remember what it was called. It was Winter Wonderland or something.
Yeah.
And I go off to this cottage with the three puppets, and we do, craft stuff, and there's a little storyline that goes with it and a couple of songs. And that video was the sort of free gift that came with the magazine. So that was the only kind of extra thing that I did. I did a couple of national parenting and childbirth trust shows, I think they were, which were held in the mains underneath the main stand of Epsom Racecourse. And it was organized by, they were like a sort of charity, but I did 2 years running where I used to come as a guest, just hand out signed postcards to the kids, say hello to them, do a sort of meet and greet with them. And then I used to do a little fashion show. They used to have a little walkway showcasing children's fashions. And because some of them were really, really tiny little creatures, I used to have to hold their hands and walk them down the catwalk and twirl them around and walk them back. So that was nice as well, because that was another way of meeting your audience and getting some feedback on what you did in the studio, which you don't really get unless you're doing something live.
A lot of people forget that people from Playdays like Carl, Woolley, Michelle, and
Yeah.
Tessa did the Belgrade pantomime.
Well, they all, yes, because you see, because Ian knew them all, he knew what they could do, and he knew he could trust them. I mean, Michelle, bless her, is no longer with us, and very sadly. But yeah, Carl's still knocking around. He's doing a completely different career path now. He's sort of running a sort of consultancy business in London. Will Brenton still producing, directing, writing. I'm trying to think who else there was. Bob is a pantomime dame in his own right now, and he works for Evolution Pantos. Katie Stevens, who's one of the great leading ladies of the RSC now. But me and Ian are still there, still there strutting our stuff.
In 1999, you played Dame Trot for the educational show Stop, Look and Listen. Was it like playing Dame on TV?
Oh, that was great fun. That was with Sheila Fraser. Yeah. That was all based around songs and sounds and loud noises and soft noises and things. And what was really interesting was when I turned up to film that, and Ian will tell you the same, when we play Dame in the theatre, we do our own makeup, and it's quite bold because obviously when you're on the stage, your face has to be seen from a distance. So the eye makeup's very bright and garish, and the lipstick's very bright. But doing it on TV, because the camera gets up so close to your face, if you had that sort of bold makeup on, you'd look more like a clown really than a sort of Dame character. So when I arrived to film it, there was a lady there called Viv Gunsey, who was my makeup lady on Playdays. So she did my Dame makeup for the TV. And by the time she'd finished it, I looked in the mirror and I thought, who is this divine creature looking back at me? Because it was really rather pretty, much more subtle than anything I could have done for the theatre. And the major difference is when I played my Dames at the Belgrade, they were Welsh, because I am Welsh, as Ian's Dames are Scottish because he is Scottish. We just decided between us that for the Stop, Look, Listen, I'd play a Northern. So she was a proper Northern mumsy Dame, quite different to the Dame that I portrayed on stage. So that, for me, that was a challenge and a really good one to do.
In 2012, you stopped playing Dame at the Belgrade Theatre and you did a lot of musicals such as Phantom, Chitty Bang Bang and Wicked. Was it like performing those musicals?
Fantastic. A great part of my career that I look back on with huge fondness and gratitude, really, because I'd never done a proper musical. Well, I'd done a couple, but not like real proper full out musicals, big musicals. And so when I auditioned for the 25th anniversary tour of Phantom of the Opera, which was 2012, 2013, it was under the pretext that I was only going to be away from the Belgrade for a year, and
Mm.
then I would come back and carry on playing Dame. But one thing led to another, and I went from playing in the tour of Phantom of the Opera. I was asked to go into the West End, and I spent 2 years in the West End in that production. Then I went straight from that into the tour of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. And then I left that tour in 2017 and went straight into Wicked. And then I was in Wicked for nearly 3.5 years. So that year out from the Belgrade suddenly turned into 11 years out, at which point Ian came back. So when Ian left to do the Tweenies and his other TV projects, I took over as Dame at the Belgrade. And then when I left, and it became apparent that I wasn't going to be coming back anytime soon, Ian came back, and that's where the state of play is at the moment. So I came back to the Belgrade in 22 to do Jack and the Beanstalk.
Yeah.
And then I've done the last three. So I did Jack and the Beanstalk, Cinderella,
Yeah, yeah.
Dick Whittington, and then we're doing Sleeping Beauty this year.
What's it like receiving the Panto Award for the best uglies?
Oh, well, I'm not, this isn't false humility, but I was absolutely chuffed a bit that we got recognized for it for Ian's sake, because he's put so much into the Belgrade Panto and left such a legacy. Um, for him to have that recognition nationally was brilliant. For me to be a part of it and for us to win the Sisters was brilliant, because we played Ugly Sisters once together before,
Yeah.
again at the Belgrade, but in 1990. So it was like 34 years later. And neither of us really knew how it was going to go, because in 1990, I'd never played a Dame. And I suddenly was pitched in with Ian, who hadn't played that many himself. I think his first Dame was the previous year when he played Widow Twankey in Aladdin. So we were both quite new to it. And by the time 2023 came along, he'd obviously got so many Dames under his belt, and I got a decade's worth from the Belgrade. And Ian and I's Dames are both very, very different. And we didn't really know how it was going to work, whether the chemistry that we have in life as friends, we didn't know whether that would translate into a working relationship, especially with Ian writing and directing the show. It gives a different slant on his approach, because obviously his mind has to be in loads of different places all at once. But we both had a fantastic time doing it. We had a lot of laughs. And the fact that we were recognized for that and, won a major award for it was a huge validation for us coming back together and doing it. So I think we were both really chuffed that we got that award with each other.
What's the best advice for someone who wants to get into the business?
Oh, that's a toughie, because I've not retired at all in any way, shape, or form, but I have stepped back and I'm not doing as much as I used to do through choice, because as you get older, your priorities in life change. Mm. And if I was coming into the business now as a new graduate, I think I would find it very tough, much, much tougher than it was when I first, because I don't think you could join the business the way I did. I don't think you get spotted in an amateur play and got offered an equity card, because you don't need equity cards now. That's been a massive change in the industry. It's like anybody can do anything. Whereas in the old days, you got your provisional card, which excluded you from working in repertory theatre and doing TV. You could only do theatre and education or community tours or small scale stuff until you'd done your 32, 33 weeks in a year, could produce those professional contracts to show equity that you'd been working. And then they gave you your full equity card, which then the world was your oyster. You could do anything. But those times have changed completely. And the way in which people audition has changed dramatically, in that for TV and film now, you'd hardly ever get called in to meet the director and casting director. This would be the audition, what we are doing now, all on screen, which I didn't object to. When my agent said, "Oh, you're going to have to learn to do self tapes, and there'll be Zoom calls and Zoom meetings and read throughs online, particularly during COVID," which was a necessity, and I understood that, and I didn't mind producing self tapes and doing Zoom calls for film and TV, because that is the medium in which you are seen. Yeah, so your work as an actor is viewed by an audience on a screen. That's fine. Where I started to object was when my agent was asking me to produce self-tapes for theatre jobs. Because for me, and I'll never change my mind on this, theatre work is all about the chemistry between the people that you're working with.
Definitely.
Be they the creatives, the director, the other actors, the other people that work in the theatre. And I don't think you can pick up enough from people's personalities by just watching them on a screen. I think you have to be in a space with them, face to face, in a room, and read the energy, which works both ways.
Yeah.
And that aspect of the business, I really didn't like at all. So if I'm asked now to do a self-tape for a theatre show, unless it's something really, really special and there's a specific purpose and reason for them wanting a self-tape, because people aren't available or out of the country or whatever, that's okay. But generally, I think what the pandemic did was breed a little bit of laziness, in that people didn't have to find rehearsal spaces, or it's easier to just give somebody a link and do it like this. So like with you being the casting director and me being the actor, or vice versa. And I don't think you can glean enough from the person by doing it that way for a theatre job.
Yeah.
So I think you have to be prepared. From that point of view, I guess it's easier for young people because they've been brought up with it. Because they've known no different. All us old lags talk about, what it was like in the old days. And I remember when I was a young actor and hearing older actors saying things like that, you'd think, oh, here they go, talking about the old days again. But it's true, things race along now so quickly, they leave you behind. So the main thing is you've really got to want to do it, and you've got to be prepared to work really hard and make sacrifices. When you're out on tour, you're away from home, you're away from your family for long swathes of time, and you have to find ways of making that work for you. So, which when you're younger is slightly easier because you don't have the ties. So what I'd say to young actors coming into the business is enjoy it while you're younger, because the older you get, the more responsibilities you have. And the more you have to prioritize your life, really.
Well, yeah, my last question is, what are you doing nowadays? You don't really perform much, so you work in the bar now.
I still do bits and bobs. Oh, I wish I did work behind the bar. No, I work front of house at the Belgrade Theatre, selling ice creams and checking tickets, and just being around and fielding people's questions and sort of welcoming them to the theatre, which I enjoy. It means I get to see all the shows that come to the Belgrade for free. Yeah. And I keep my acting chops oiled, as it were, every year. Ian keeps asking me back to do the Pantos. So at least I know I've got that to look forward to at the end of the year. And like I've said to my agent, never say never. If the right project comes in and I want to do it and they want me to do it, then I'll take a job. But I'm not actively looking for anything at the moment.
Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Ben. I hope this has been okay for you. Okay, cheers, Ben.